the more people that press the like button, the more people that will see this very live stream. Very, very important. After you smash the like button, share this live stream. Sharing is caring. The share button is close to that. And super chats are welcome, all those things. We got two great guests today. One is a former New York Times labor reporter, Stephen Greenhouse, who I'm going to speak with a little bit later. Stephen Greenhouse has been covering labor and unions for basically 30 to 40 years. So I interviewed him to talk about the ongoing surge in unions, strikes, the momentum right now Amazon workers have, Starbucks workers have in terms of unionization. So I'm going to have that for you in just a short while. But first, I wanted to talk about what I thought was a fairly objectionable Morning Joe clip and the deeper aspects of that. So joining me is Alec Karakatsanis. Did I pronounce your last name right, Alec? You there, Alec? Okay. Alec, okay. Alec couldn't hear me. Colin, can you check with him? So let me get Alec back. Hold on. 1 second. I just went to you. You respond. All right. While we get him up to see if he could hear me. Again, we're going to have Alec on to talk about, boy, is Morning Joe very concerned about the shoplifting of steak. The shoplifting of steaks, Morning Joe is very worried about. So we're going to talk about that. And again, with Stephen Greenhouse in just a little bit. Let me see. Can you hear me, Alec?
Yes, I can. How are you?
Hey, thanks for joining me. Alec Karakatsanis. Did I pronounce your last name right?
Yes, you did.
Great. Thanks for coming on short notice. So I saw this Morning Joe clip, and the first person I thought of was you, because you kind of are a Twitter thread machine. And you, first off, let me just make sure I, tell people where you're from. You're the founder and the executive director with the Civil Rights Corps, which does civil rights litigation aimed at resensitizing our culture to the injustices of the American legal system. So I thought of you because you've written a lot about kind of the media has a selective coverage format where they seem to be very focused recently on the shoplifting surge, where they do not cover the more systemic shoplifting that goes on. I want to get to that. But first, if the audience hasn't seen, let's see what the hubbubaloo at Morning Joe was the other day.
It's true that people are just walking in and walking out with it.
No, there's no doubt about it. I mean, you go to a local pharmacy, Dwayne Reed or Rite Aid, any of them, and you've got to get someone to help assist you. I mean, they have the little button there. Yep. You hit the buzzer, and the guy comes over and unlocks your toothpaste. Yes. I mean, we're talking about basic stuff.
He's as well.
What did I miss that we now have to lock up toothpaste?
Yeah, and
I'm just curious, Rev, really quickly. I mean, Eric Adams said he's going to do his best to fix this. I'm just curious. I mean, he's got a governor who's saying, well, I don't know that we want to give the judges any power to make decisions on whether they've seen the same bad guy in front of them like 12 times in the past week. And then you've got a DA. I know you talked to the DA. The DA's going, oh, we don't want to punish anybody unless it's like really bad. You know, so, yeah, you can steal whatever you want to steal. And, yeah, we won't do any jail time. And then you've got, a woke city council. I'm just curious, is Eric Adams going to be able to do anything? Well, he's obviously surrounded by elected officials who want New York to remain chaotic.
Well, I think he's got a challenge there because there is a debate in the criminal justice system, and there are those that are concerned, including me, about overloading the system and the jails with petty crimes. But at the same time, you cannot have a culture where people are just at random, just robbing and stealing, and is out of control and is put on the front page of newspapers, which only encourages others to do it. In fairness to Eric, he's only been mayor 5 weeks. But in
so you get the point. You get the point. So that was in reference, Alec, to I guess somebody shoplifted 10 steaks from a supermarket. Okay, we're not telling people to shoplift, but not exactly a scandal. But I thought of you because Morning Joe covered that. And we've seen other coverage of media picking up shoplifting surges in other states, and then governors taking action, specifically Gavin Newsom, who pushed legislation to address the shoplifting surge. But you have talked a lot about what about the global racket of wage theft? What about all of this other global systemic shoplifting that we don't quite see a lot of coverage of in the corporate media?
I think it's really important to understand, first and foremost, what the agenda behind this coverage is. The agenda is more money for police violence, for weaponry and surveillance tools, for the largest and most expensive police bureaucracy in the history of the world, which is the NYPD. We are in a country that cages Black people at a rate 6 times that of South Africa of apartheid. It's putting more human beings in cages than any society that has ever existed in the history of the world. And in that context, they are arguing for even more human caging, even more policing. How are they doing that and why? I think it's very important to understand that there are some people that benefit a great deal from the selective outrage and urgency that the media creates over very minor things like shoplifting. For example, right now, as you and I are talking, 10 million human beings die every single year from air pollution, okay? There are several 100,000 violations of the Clean Water Act by corporations every single year in this country, right? There's $137 million that every single day of corporate wage theft in this country. That's $50 billion a year. That is 5 times all of the combined burglaries, car thefts, larceny, shoplifting in this country's economy, right? If you can keep going, I think you get the point, but I think another really important fact is that there's $1 trillion a year in tax evasion by the wealthy. That's 20 times all of wage theft. And that's 100 times all of the so-called property crimes that police and the media want you to focus on. Okay, so when you think about who the police are and who the New York mayor is and what interests Al Sharpton is promoting, it is the people that want to talk about law enforcement, but they only want to enforce some laws against some people some of the time. And the sort of legal violations they want you focused on are the ones committed by very poor people that affect almost a tiny, minuscule percentage of the economy and have a very insignificant effect on people's well-being, as opposed to the incredible, immense harm being perpetrated by corporate polluters, corporate wage theft thieves, corporate tax evaders, and all of the crimes that are really committed by the wealthy. And it's a very sophisticated strategy because what the media chooses to cover and what the media chooses to think of as urgent actually filters down into the public. So that if you do surveys right now, lots of people in the public actually think shoplifting is some kind of a threat. At a time of rising fascism and global warming and impending ecological devastation and extraordinary corporate extraction, we literally have people worrying right now about shoplifting from Trader Joe's. It's astonishing.
And you've tweeted about this before. Reporters don't cover the 137 million in corporate wage theft every day. Again, 137 million every day. You've talked about the global, basically 50 billion, that this is a $50 billion wage theft. I wanted to ask you, could it have anything to do with who's sponsoring Morning Joe? I mean, I know that's a dumb, an obvious question, but I'm covering Amazon's union busting. Well, a lot of these channels, they kind of sort of talk about bad things about Amazon, but they only go up to a certain line. And then you see Amazon's commercials on that channel or Amazon sponsoring Politico Playbook and on and on. So can you kind of talk about, I mean, the media, in my view, is largely captured by a lot of these corporations committing the wage theft.
I think it's a little bit more insidious than that. Yes, of course, executives at large corporations are constantly putting pressure on their subsidiary companies that own news stations, that invest in news stations. There's private equity firms that own a lot of print newspapers around the country. There's incredible consolidation in the media industry around local TV stations, and some of the largest corporations in the world own these network television stations. Yes, it's happening in that way, but I think it's more insidious. I think the fact is that it determines who even gets a show on these channels, what is even talked about, not just what they say, it's what are they even talking about, right? And I think most people don't even realize that it's not that some company is saying to Joe Scarborough, I want you to have this position on shoplifting. It's that Joe Scarborough knows that to keep his job, he has to start talking about and keep talking about certain types of issues and ignore other types of issues. It's a subconscious thing almost. Everyone who's successful in network television or in corporate dominated newsrooms, they know very well what subject matters are off limits and what subject matter is important to keep their jobs. And I think it gets even more insidious than that. And it gets to the point where nobody even has to say to Joe Scarborough anymore, here's the position you need to take on this issue. I think the second big issue is, in addition to everybody kind of knowing what positions politically are safe for them to take, given the corporate consolidation of the media industry, these people are from a very particular social class themselves. These are the kind of things they actually genuinely talk about at dinner parties. Al Sharpton is probably genuinely concerned about the inconvenience to wealthy people of having to have someone unlock a cabinet at CVS. These are people who generally and typically, and obviously I'm speaking crudely and sort of broad brushstrokes, but the media class in general are fairly wealthy. They're sort of wealthy professionals. They tend not to be or working class people, and they tend not to have to deal with things like police violence and state brutality and human caging, right? And so the concerns that seem urgent in their own minds, even genuinely, even without the corruption aspect of it, are concerns that a particular social class has. And they actually tend to be really different from the concerns of people that are struggling to afford their insulin payments, that are struggling every single day with a landlord who's trying to illegally evict them, that are struggling with a company that is taking their wage and they don't have the ability to fight back because they're undocumented. Those are the kinds of concerns that real ordinary people have, and those are really different from the kinds of things that concern you if you're a very wealthy multimillionaire MSNBC host.
And they're also not covering, by the way, Colin, if you have this, rents are up more than 30% in some cities. I mean, to me, that's a form of theft. The gentrification crisis in this country, where landlords and real estate developers are jacking up rents everywhere to the point where people are being forced out of where they live. I mean, San Francisco, Seattle, Los Angeles. I mean, the list goes on and on. You also have, it just came out, drug companies have raised their prices just at the beginning of this year by over 6%. Just at the beginning of this year by over 6%. Then you have, the obvious, Colin, if you have the chart, look at the last 40 years. That line. Going to the top since 1980, the income inequality in this country. So it's not only the systemic wage theft they're not covering, but even in real time, they're not covering affordable, the housing prices skyrocketing, big pharma jacking up prices still during a very active pandemic. Your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think people need to understand, and this is what I try to do in my Twitter threads. I try to, with evidence, with actual data, just try to show people that the things you see on the news are carefully curated. They are, in many cases, they're true in the sense that they're not completely fabricated, right? It's just, for example, I don't doubt Al Sharpton's assertion that someone stole 10 pieces of meat from a Trader Joe's. So the most sophisticated propaganda is often not things that are just totally untrue. It's what story are you telling? Which facts are you telling? Which facts are you leaving out, right? So, for example, one of the most, I think, propagandistic elements of what Sharpton is doing is complaining about people stealing toothpaste from CVS or steak from Trader Joe's, and then linking that somehow to the need for more policing. That is the propagandistic element that most worries me, right? In addition to what I mentioned earlier about just not even covering at all the massive corporate fraud and theft and environmental degradation that is far more serious in terms of the cost to all of our lives. But it's this connection to police. That too is akin to climate science denial. There is absolutely no evidence that more funding for the NYPD is going to lead to fewer steaks being stolen from Trader Joe's, when in fact, most of what the police call crime is the result of things like poverty, lack of access to healthcare, lack of access to treatment, lack of access to programming for kids. I mean, they're very easy things that we know how to solve if we made the right investments, but instead we've got an 11 or $12 billion NYPD machine in New York that is a giant bureaucracy that is very, very, very good at scaring people into getting more and more money.
And can I also ask you, with COVID, because there's this big push now. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a doctor or a scientist, but I look at the heat map and it's still red all over the country. But there's this big push right now to, drop the mask mandates, drop other safety protocols for COVID, basically say, we're in a situation, we got to get back to normal, this and that. To me, it's obvious that this is for big business. It's obvious that, in previous weeks, the CDC shortened the time for quarantining because big businesses are complaining, particularly the airlines. But to me, that kind of falls into the broader topic that we're talking about, which is, these corporate media outlets are basically just pushing narratives to suit corporate America. Everybody could have different opinions on COVID and COVID fatigue, but by the science, right now would not be the exact right time, one would think, to drop all these precautions right away. What are your thoughts on the corporate media has been seeming to go along with that narrative?
I don't pretend to be a scientist or an epidemiologist, or I am not as well versed in that area, so I haven't been able to identify all of the ways in which the corporate media is propagandizing. But I will say, in every other area that I am an expert, in the law and the legal system, with respect to policing and imprisonment and social justice movements, and every area that I understand very well, I see that the corporate media is crafting and perpetuating and disseminating certain narratives of urgency. And it's creating a sense of urgency around things that are easily monetizable and profitable for people who control things and own things in our society. And they're ignoring massive amounts of harm. So for example, you might imagine you could wake up every single morning to a front page headline in the New York Times or NBC that tells you how many people died the night before from poverty, right? That would not be in the interests of the people who own things in our society. You could see a headline with how many people became homeless the night before. That would be daily news, and it should be daily news. It's just as significant as when an airline crashes and kills 137 people. It's just as significant to know that several thousand people died because our society didn't care enough about them to give them food. So I think, although I can't speak to the COVID science and to the ways in which the media narrative, if it's like every other area, then narratives are being concocted not based on what's good science or what's good for public health, but based on what is profitable for a small percentage of our society.
And the last thing, because I know you got to go, I'll just point out, everybody got to have a different definition of theft. But in this pandemic, billionaires added $5 trillion to their fortunes during the COVID pandemic, according to Oxfam, exacerbating economic inequality as the pandemic pushed millions around the world into poverty. The data was compiled by Forbes. Oxfam says in a new report that the total wealth of billionaires jumped from 8.6 trillion in March 2020 to 13.8 trillion in November of 2021, a bigger increase than the previous 14 years combined. So I don't know. Did billionaires just get, work harder, or is there something structurally wrong with that?
I think the question answers itself.
There, I agree. Thank you, Alec Karakatsanis. You are the founder and executive director of the Civil Rights Corps. Everybody check him out on Twitter at EqualityAlec. I appreciate you jumping in on this because you're the first person I thought. And I would encourage people, once they follow Alec, check these threads that he's done in the past, because it really gives you a really, really good look on the actual data of wage theft and other types of theft, and what the media is actually covering. It's quite the gap. Thank you, man.
Thank you, Jordan.
So that was Alec Karakatsanis with the Civil Rights Corps. Everybody, keep smashing that like button. We got almost 200 people watching, but not enough of you have pressed the like button. So it's the thumbs up button right under the live stream. The more people that press like, the more people that will see this live stream. We got a lot more of the show to show you. Let me read some super chats before I go. We just got a super chat. Radical Rosie Marusa, $5. Love you, Jordan. Keep up the great work. Thank you. You just joined as a member on YouTube too. Before I air the next interview, I also wanted to give a quick shout out because we are still getting couple new Status Coup members, which we very much need. Hint, hint. Welcome new Status Coup member Kurt signed up within the last hour. Jacqueline just signed up. S just signed up, and Sean just signed up. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 new Status Coup members. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We actually got 16 new Status Coup members the other day when I did an extra hour show, basically begging you to support us because we really, 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 really need to grow. We're trying to expand. I need an administrative assistant because I am really stretched way too thin to the point where my wife is looking at me and is concerned because of how much work is on my plate. So if it's within your means, please consider signing up. StatusCoup.com/join. You can become a member at $5 a month. We also have $10 a month memberships, $20 a month memberships, or $179 annually. It makes a big difference to help our investigative reporting as well as to help our on-the-ground reporting, where, you know, obviously we cover a lot of stories on the ground, which I'm hoping to get back on the ground in the next few weeks. Colin, if you have the Amazon photos, if you didn't see this, I wanted to show you, in addition to the video that we obtained earlier in the week showing Amazon's union busting. And in that video, it was leaked to us at Status Coup that in a union busting meeting, an Amazon general manager at the large Staten Island warehouse where workers are currently trying to win a union. They were just awarded the right to hold a union election. So now they're trying to actually win the vote. Amazon started back up with the union busting sessions, which are mandatory daily sessions, which workers have to come to. So we obtained videos showing that the general manager at this Amazon warehouse in Staten Island was trying to literally toss out, like demand that workers that are part of the organizing effort for that union demand that they leave the mandatory union busting session so that they would have direct access to the workers who are kind of on the fence about the union so that they could push their propaganda. This morning, we tweeted out, because I obtained photos inside the warehouse, Amazon is back at putting up anti-union propaganda all over the warehouse. Colin, if you could put that up. So here you have one image at the warehouse where Amazon says, ask how. The ALU may make a lot of, quote, promises. The ALU is the Amazon labor union. Make a lot of promises, but it's important to ask how they plan to achieve them. How could a union guarantee benefits will improve? How could a union guarantee my pay will increase? How much will dues be? How many times has the ALU negotiated on behalf of others? Do your own research, in all caps. So that's one of the signs that they just put back up in the break room, by the way. Obviously, the union isn't guaranteeing you those things. They are saying we have a much better chance of raising wages, getting better benefits, safer working conditions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, if we have a union. They're not guaranteeing you those things. The other sign that they put up, Colin, if you have it, this one was a little bit more insidious. A union and the reality of dues. A union is a business, and every business needs money. That's why they typically charge members dues, which means part of your paychecks could wind up going to the union. It's actually a lie. Unions are not businesses. They're unions. They're not for-profit mechanisms, so that's just propaganda. Of course, Amazon just wants to help you get the facts, right? If you could put it back up, Colin. So dues are typically mandatory in New York. In New York, union dues unions typically demand that dues be mandatory for everyone whose workplace is represented by a union, whether or not you voted for one or whether you're happy with their work. Yes, that's true, but you also get the benefits of the union, whether you voted for it or not, whether you support it or not. And ask the ALU about dues, get the facts. So after the mandatory union busting meeting, which we obtained the video, if you haven't seen that video, it's up on the channel. It's about 2.5 minutes. It's one of our most recent videos. We also put up captions for the video because the audio wasn't amazing. After that, now they're starting to put back up all the union busting signs all over this warehouse. For a while, they stopped with the union busting signs because of pushback, and in part because we were the ones continually reporting Status Coup was continually breaking on Twitter and Substack all the union busting signs they were putting up. So Amazon wasn't looking good. But now they decided to put it back up. I wonder why. Right after the National Labor Relations Board grants Amazon workers at this Staten Island warehouse a union vote. So we don't know the date of the election yet, but we do know they will have an election. So we'll keep on this, but definitely, hey, if you're not following us on Twitter, that's where we've been posting a lot of these things. So at Status Coup on Twitter, we have the union busting video that we obtained at the top of our Twitter. And earlier today, we posted those two images of additional union busting signage that Amazon is putting up all over the warehouse. So with that said, please, again, smash that like button. We got 170 people watching. 140 of you have pressed like. Please share this live stream. The more people that press share, it makes a big, big difference. Earlier today, I did an interview with a former New York Times reporter. His name's Stephen Greenhouse. He's covered the labor movement for over probably 35 to 40 years. He was at the New York Times, but left a couple years ago. So I wanted to speak with him about a lot of what we're talking about here. Amazon's union busting. Starbucks just fired in Memphis union organizers. I wanted to talk to him about the overall union movement and the surge we're seeing right now of workers on strike, workers trying to unionize, workers winning their strikes. Starbucks finally became the first unionized Starbucks in America, in Buffalo, which we were on the ground covering. So I spoke with him a lot of things. Also talked about the Democratic Party. We had some differences of opinion on that, but you'll see that here. So it was a really good interview. Again, this is Stephen Greenhouse, who's a former New York Times labor reporter. So we're going to play that interview. Again, please, if you can, consider supporting Status Coup. $5 a month. StatusCoup.com/join. You can become a member for as low as $5 a month to help support our journalism, to help us grow our funding so we could go out on the ground and cover more of these things. Pretty please, cherry on top. Without further ado, here's my interview with Stephen Greenhouse. It's Jordan. I am delighted to be joined by Stephen Greenhouse. You are a longtime labor reporter. You worked for the New York Times for 31 years. And the last 19 of those years were as the Times labor and workplace reporter. You're also the author of Beaten Down, Worked Up, the Past, Present, and Future of American Labor. You have covered pretty much across the board business. You've covered the steel and other basic industries, as well as spending 2.5 years as the newspaper's Midwest business correspondent in Chicago. I'm really happy to talk to you because I've been covering, the kind of whatever you want to call this, the renewed labor surge, worker strikes, union drives. I was on the ground last year covering the John Deere workers at their picket lines in Iowa, covering the Starbucks workers in Buffalo before they won. And there is a lot of momentum, but there's also a lot of pushback, as we expect from the corporate Goliaths. I wanted to start with Amazon because the workers at the Staten Island warehouse were just awarded with an election. So they now have the right to hold a union election. That is step one. And I've been chronicling Amazon's union busting now against them for over a year. First, let's play the video that I obtained showing a couple days ago part of Amazon's latest union busting session.
Sorry, I just want to give very clear guidance here.
We want to be. I feel like we can ask questions.
I don't need to cut you off.
To be able to answer questions.
I don't need to cut you off, but I am asking everyone who is not part, who is not scheduled to be, please leave the room right now. You were not scheduled to be in this particular meeting. I said this 3 times. I'm asking you to please leave the room, and if you don't, you will be insubordinate. And I want to make sure all of you understand that if you refuse to leave the room when I asked you 3 times already, that you would be willingly insubordinate.
I want to understand how we're insubordinate.
Is there anyone here? Is there anyone inside the room who did not understand what I shared?
No, we understand, but we also know that you understand that if you make us leave the room, that's a charge against Amazon.
Is this a non-work area?
All right.
Is this a non-work area?
I think I said it 3 times already.
Can you answer my question, Felipe?
3 times. If you were not scheduled to be in the room for this particular meeting, I asked you to leave the room. We don't have it.
Yeah, we're staying. We're staying.
That's part of the video that we obtained. Essentially, Amazon has been holding these mandatory trainings. They're essentially union busting sessions. Starbucks is doing them. Most companies that are facing, a union effort do these kind of sessions. I know you had some strong reactions when we obtained that and tweeted it out. What are your thoughts based on your many, many years of reporting that they seem to be wanting the most active union organizers to leave the room?
Yeah. So I wrote this book, Beaten Down, Worked Up. It came out 2 years ago. It's still very current, but like there's a lot more, folks are a lot more worked up now than they were 2-3 years ago. And we're certainly seeing that at Amazon. We're certainly seeing that at Starbucks. And in seeing that video, to my mind, there are 3 remarkable things. One, that it was leaked to you, it was leaked to someone. It's very hard to get your hands on something like that. So my hat's off to you and showing it to the world. A second remarkable thing is it shows that the workers are really standing up, digging in, not being stepped on, not being rolled over. And connected to that, also remarkable is that they know their rights and they're standing up and saying, if we engage in collective action, you cannot punish us. You can say we're being insubordinate. And the executive in the front of the room knows the code word to use, that if you are insubordinate, even if you're doing pro-union stuff, we can fire you, maybe. So, and the third remarkable thing is that the anti-union consultant just gives up. He throws his hands up and says, I guess I'm going to end this right now, because it was embarrassing to him. It showed that the pro-union people kind of trumped him, no pun intended, but like they really had the upper hand in that confrontation. Having said that, Jordan, it's one thing to win a union election at Starbucks where there are 30 workers and you need 16 of the 30 to get a majority. It's a whole other kettle of fish in an Amazon warehouse where there are 5,000 to 6,000 workers to get 50% plus one. That's a much, much harder thing to do. And the victories in Starbucks are extremely important because Starbucks is one of the iconic American companies. As is the case with Amazon, it threw everything it could to stop the union, and the union still won in the 2 cafes stores in Buffalo. I think the union's going to win many, many other Starbucks over the next few weeks, and that's a huge thing. Winning at Amazon is much harder because Amazon's so much bigger, and it's easier for union organizers to reach the Starbucks workers. They could just stand out on the sidewalk and talk to them after work. Whereas Amazon, the union organizers, it's hard for them to get close to the workers. They're not allowed into the warehouse. They're not allowed on the company parking lot. So it's much, much harder. So I think, I often write in my book and elsewhere that the playing field when you're facing an anti-union employer is tilted, skewed, usually with the Winter Olympics, the ice skating rink is tilted usually in favor of the corporation against the union. I think that's especially true at Amazon, where the company has access to propagandize the workers 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, whether through mandatory anti-union meetings or through videos in lunchrooms or break rooms, or even those stupid, I've been writing about labor for 25, 30 years. Never before did I hear of a company putting anti-union posters in a toilet stall. And that's what Amazon did. And kind of like that shows how aggressive Amazon it is, and in ways shows how low it will go, that even in the privacy of trying to do your number 2 on the toilet, they're trying to force feed you anti-union stuff. So if they win if the union wins in Alabama, if the union wins in Staten Island, that would be a tremendous victory and showing that you could really win at an uphill battle.
And I also wanted to bring up, this is just some of the signage we've obtained, a barrage of Amazon's anti-union signs that they've put all over the warehouse. They stopped for a while. Now they're putting them back up conveniently after the workers have some momentum, after they've been awarded that they could hold an election. So we got this, I put it out this morning on our Twitter, at Status Coup, just, sample signs, ask how. The ALU, which is Amazon Labor Union, may make a lot of promises, in quotation, but it's important to ask how they plan to achieve them. How could a union guarantee my benefits will improve? How could a union guarantee my pay will increase? How much will dues be? How many times has the ALU negotiated on behalf of others? So that's just one of the anti-union signs. Another one, a union and the reality of dues. A union is a business, and every business needs money. So that's a common propaganda tool, calling the union a business. Dues are typically mandatory in New York. Ask the ALU about dues, get the facts. Let's start with your impressions of the messaging they're putting out there, because the fact of the matter is, I've been to this warehouse a lot. These are a lot of younger workers. I mean, I see the workers that come off that bus. I don't have, statistics, but they look 18 to 25, 18 to 26. Sure, there's older workers sprinkled in, but it's a lot of younger workers. And when you're being bombarded all day with propaganda, it's a powerful thing, because they might not be well versed on unions or their rights or those kind of things.
So first, to the Amazon labor union in Staten Island, it's quite a coup for them to get the 30, 40%, 50% of signatures needed to get the NLRB to give a green light to hold an election. That's very hard to do, and they did that. And hats off to them for accomplishing that. And Amazon, of course, is being its old, aggressively anti-union self. You showed two posters, Jordan. One I thought was, asking the smart questions and in ways fair questions, somewhat unfair too, about, what can the union do for you? The union can't guarantee you raises. And if the union says, we're going to get you raises of 10%, 20%, that's not true. And that, and they'll be accused of unfair labor practices by promising something that they can't give. So management smartly will often say, can they promise you wage increases? And the Amazon Labor Union, this is the first, it's a new union, less than a year old. This is the first place they're trying to organize. And it's a legitimate question when you say, have they ever negotiated a contract? And this is a big problem for any first-time union, when you try to negotiate and you don't get anywhere and you threaten to go on strike, you don't have a strike fund the way the Teamsters have a strike fund, the United Steelworkers have a strike fund, or the service employees have a strike fund. So that makes it harder. And as much as I admire Christian Smalls, the head of the Amazon Labor Union, who's so courageous and very smart, he does have that. I thought he'd link up with another union because he will need some financial backing, I thought, now and also if and when they win, just to pay for lawyers and stuff. Now, the second poster, and I tweeted about this earlier today, this is the typical traditional anti-union dishonest BS. And I write about this in my book. Walmart also says, a union is a business. They just want their dues. And in my book, I quote, one of the nation's foremost labor experts, Tom Koken at MIT. And Tom says, basically, he's more polite. He says, that's just not true. Unions are entities, they're institutions, they're groups of workers that are formed not to make money like a business. They're formed to improve wages and benefits and safety and pensions and health. And, like the Girl Scouts, they need money to function. So Girl Scouts sell cookies, unions, charge dues because you need professional negotiators. You need to pay for lawyers if someone's fired improperly. A union with 10,000 members probably needs a union president, and maybe that person has to be full-time and you have to pay that person a salary. So you have dues. So, one of the crazy things that Amazon's suggesting is, well, unions should have dues, so they should be able to even have smart lawyers or smart negotiators or smart researchers that dig up dirt on the things that corporate executives are doing wrong or the way corporations break the law on safety. And in saying that unions shouldn't pay dues, they're trying to turn workers unfairly against a union, and workers don't understand that, you might have to pay $400 to $500 worth of dues a year, but the union might result in $3,000 worth of raises a year, health benefits that are worth another $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a year than non-union benefits. And there are all these studies, gazillions of studies saying that union members have, get a better deal at work and pay and benefits and job security than non-union members. But Amazon, and I'm sure the $1,000 an hour, anti-union lawyers are saying, Trump has this idea that unions are businesses and that you might be able to fool, trick, manipulate, these young workers into thinking that unions are just fighting to put money in their pockets. Having said that, Jordan, there are unfortunately, these very dishonest entrepreneurs who try to form, there are a few of these, they're not very common, that try to form unions just to put money in their pocket. But I could assure you that someone like Christian Smalls is, a really impressive, idealistic, high-minded, honest union person. And he was fired fighting Amazon at the Staten Island warehouse for better protections for workers during the pandemic. And he has really dug in and is fighting very hard. And he's certainly not doing it as a business.
I wanted to touch on that because to me, for example, I've covered a lot of pipeline fights. I was at Standing Rock, freezing my ass off for 6 months. One of the best journalistic experiences of my life. There was a lot
not when Pinkertons have pipes and are hitting union members. No.
Right. Oil pipelines. Yeah. And, to me, most of these companies, they don't really feel a threat to break the law. Because none of these executives are going to jail. Okay, they'll pay the fine. The oil companies, they don't want to pay, whatever the massive fine is, but it's baked into the balance sheet. And I look at labor and this union busting, and I'd love your experience and reporting. To me, the National Labor Relations Board, it doesn't really have much teeth. That's not completely their fault, but Amazon is going to continue doing this union busting. Starbucks is going to continue doing this level of union busting because what actually is the grave penalty to them? Paying fines, a national settlement where they have to give workers, notice of their rights. I wanted to ask you from the National Labor Relations Board purview. It seems to me it's a board without much teeth, whether it's their fault or not, and the PRO Act could make a huge difference in actually preventing a lot of the things we're seeing that you and I are talking about.
So, Jordan, allow me a little history. So, the 1930s with the Great Depression, unemployment reached, 25%. Millions of Americans, were on bread lines, eating an apple a day, not much more. And Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal Congress wanted to do something to lift workers, to increase their wages, to increase their bargaining power vis-a-vis corporations. So in 1935, the National Labor Relations Act was passed. That created the National Labor Relations Board to help protect workers' rights. And that landmark law created a federally protected right for workers to form unions, that if a majority of workers at a private sector workplace vote to unionize, then the employer has to recognize and negotiate with the union. Now, but to get that passed and to get the support of the Southern senators who needed, FDR had to agree to, virtually no penalties when corporations break the law. So here we are 85 years later, and corporations see that under the National Labor Relations Act, they could break the law right and left, egregiously, shamelessly. And under the law, unlike virtually all other laws, there's no financial penalty. There are no fines for violating the law. So we just saw Starbucks fire 7 of the workers who are leading the unionization effort in Memphis. So if the NLRB finds that they were fired illegally because they supported the union, Starbucks can't be fined. The worst that can happen is it can be ordered to pay, the week's back pay, the month's back pay, when the workers were supposed to be working, but they were out of work. But if in the meantime, the workers found another job, perhaps the job even paid more than Starbucks, then you subtract those earnings from all the back pay owed, so Starbucks may well owe nothing. In my book, I give the example of a nursing home worker, a very courageous nursing home worker in West Palm Beach, Florida, who was leading a unionization campaign. And the company fired him and totally made up this pretext of firing him that he supposedly choked a nurse. 5 years of litigation. The regional NLRB, the national NLRB, the United States Court of Appeals. Finally, he was reinstated after 5 years. And by then the unionization drive had died. And because he had found other jobs in those 5 years, the company basically only had to pay him like $1,000 in back pay. So, as I've written, I think it's almost malpractice for a management side labor lawyer not to tell their client, you should break the law. You're much better off to break the law. Take a nursing home. If you're trying to negotiate, unionize a nursing home, say with 200 workers, and you unionize it and win a 10 or 15% increase in pay and better health benefits and pensions, that might cost the nursing home $100, $200, $300,000 a year extra. But if you fire the 4 workers who are leading the unionization effort, maybe you'll be hit with $10,000 in back pay. And you might delay the unionization drive for 2 years or 3 years. So like, it's really smart to break the law. And the PRO Act, the Protecting Right to Organize Act, finally aims to put some financial teeth into the National Labor Relations Act. But once again, a filibuster by Republicans is going to, evidently, is going to prevent a pro-union legislation from being enacted. And, you know, people will say, oh, the Democrats aren't doing enough to help unions, but they forget that this now is the 5th time that a Democratic president has sought to strengthen the National Labor Relations Act to make it easier to unionize. President Lyndon Johnson did it, Jimmy Carter tried to do it, Bill Clinton tried to do it, Barack Obama tried to do it, and now Joe Biden. They've all tried pushing through bills that would make it easier to unionize, and all 5 times the Democrats couldn't get the 60 votes needed. Sometimes some very conservative Democrats got cold feet and weren't supporting the bill, but even so, they, the Republicans have repeatedly been able to block it. So,
isn't there a bit of a conflict too on the Democratic end? Because I mean, let's just call it what it is. They're getting the same Wall Street money. They're getting a lot of the same big donor money, and a lot of those donors across industry, they're not so big on unions. So to me, yeah, maybe the Republicans are blocking it via filibuster, but how much does the Democratic Party actually want this or willing to fight for it?
So the Protecting the Right to Organize Act passed the House of Representatives with this,
right,
just this large a Democratic margin. And in the Senate, I think 46 or 47 of the 50 Democrats support the Protecting the Right to Organize Act. Joe Manchin very much supports it, although he doesn't support a filibuster to overcome it. I think the two Democratic senators of Virginia both got cold feet about it. Right. And, but that 46 out of 50, 47 out of 50 Democrats support it. That's pretty good. And I agree with you, Jordan, that there's, corporations have a lot of sway over the Democratic Party, especially so-called centrist or conservative Democrats. But I think the Democrats see much more now than under Obama and under Clinton that, the continuing decline of unions. And then that's what we've seen. We hate to use that phrase, but unions have declined in size and power over the past 20, 30, 40 years. And the declining power of unions, both at the negotiating table and in politics, has really hurt workers, and it's really hurt the Democrats.
Right.
It used to be that unions represented, 30, 35% of workers in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Now it's down to 10, 12, 15%. I think in Wisconsin now it's actually down under 10%. And if unions had the membership that they used to have in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, there's no way Donald Trump would have won those states in 2016. I think Democrats increasingly see that we can't win by being seen as the party of the coastal elite, that we have to really attract our traditional blue collar base that, from Franklin Roosevelt through Harry Truman, through John Kennedy, through Johnson, really back the Democrats. And now a big problem Democrats have is that, white voters without a college degree generally support the Republicans far more than they support the Democrats. And it used to be the other way around. Those working class voters used to see the Democrats as the folks who pushed to strengthen unions and raise Social Security and provide better health coverage. And the Republicans are against all those things. They're against raising Social Security. They're against better health coverage for people. They're against a higher minimum wage. But they kind of trick all these, working class people into saying, well, we're the party for you. We want to keep out immigrants. Immigrants are hurting you. We want to get tough on China. And I think the Republican Party, by focusing on a lot of cultural issues, abortion, transgender, has kind of persuaded many Republican working class folks to vote Republican. And Democrats really have seen, and Biden sees this very clearly, and union leaders see this much more than 5 or 10 years ago, that we have to really talk to union members to make them see that Republicans are hurting them on economic interests and are trying to get them to focus on these cultural issues that really don't do much to improve their lives.
Well, I also think, obviously, Republicans were complicit in this, but I went around in 2016. I covered, God knows, probably like 40 to 50 Trump rallies. I got the therapy bills to prove it. And I could tell you, yeah, of course, cosmopolitan, coastal journalists, their message was this is all about racism, Trump surge. And there was certainly a whole lot of it. But I could tell you, there was a lot of Trump supporters that were talking about NAFTA to me. And were, the Republicans before that too, but they blame Bill Clinton because it happened under Bill Clinton. They believe that Hillary Clinton, if elected president, would do, a shuck and jive and ram through the TPP, even though as a candidate, she said she wouldn't. So, to me, Democrats, they talk the right language about unions, but they have pushed a lot of legislation that have sold union jobs to other countries. Yes, the Republicans were totally on board with that. But, if they're not, because there were a lot of Trump supporters I met that I was shocked when I asked them, who's your number two? They said Bernie Sanders, in part because there was overlap on free trade. Fair trade.
I mean, so you're absolutely right. I think Bill Clinton, somewhat Barack Obama, somewhat Hillary Clinton, they were for free trade. They were pushed by corporate donors, and Obama pushed for TPP for some fairly legitimate foreign policy reasons, but he wasn't paying enough attention to how so many workers, especially in the Midwest of the United States, were hurt, have been hurt by these free trade agreements. So I think Bill Clinton was trying to do what the coastal elites wanted, and Obama too. But people forget it wasn't Bill Clinton who negotiated NAFTA. It was George H.W. Bush. And when the Senate voted to approve NAFTA, Republican senators voted overwhelmingly in favor of NAFTA, right. And Democratic senators, were very torn about it. But Bill Clinton, because the Republicans are very smart, they put all the blame on Clinton, whereas the Democrats should have thrown it right back at them, saying it's the Republicans who really created NAFTA. But they've done the Democrats kind of are much worse than the Republicans in fighting on economic issues. But Biden, I think, gets that. In many ways, freer trade helps everybody. And it's nice to be able to buy, products from German products or Vietnamese products or whatever. But I think far too often not enough attention has been paid about how these free trade agreements that have encouraged manufacturing to go abroad, whether NAFTA or permanent trade relations with China, have really hurt Midwestern communities. Now, where that ties in with racial resentment. So, there have been all these studies about why did Trump win? Was it that blue-collar workers in the Midwest were hurting economically, or was it racism? And some people have said it's kind of this overall status threat that the white working class, feels that all these immigrants are coming in, that all these, women are taking jobs that once went to men. They see African Americans favored sometimes in affirmative action, although African Americans still, there's a huge pay gap for African Americans and for women. So the Republicans have kind of, to my mind, exaggerated, their stock and trade is exaggerating these threats to whites and say, oh, the Democrats are bad. They favor blacks. They favor women. They favor immigrants. And Trump, who's incredibly dishonest in so many ways, as I often tell people, I'm from New York. I followed Donald Trump for 30, 40 years. I've seen for 30, 40 years what a tremendous liar and con man he is. And I remember when he was a Democrat who supported abortion. I still thought he was a con man and that, people should not believe anything he said. And that he's the same animal he was 30, 40 years ago. He says whatever he needs to say to make himself look good. So Trump realized that a great way to win the votes of working class voters, especially in the Midwest, which was really beaten down a lot by trade agreements, was to focus on, you can call it racial resentment, you could call it status threat, you could call it resentment towards trade agreements. And the Democrats, again, Biden gets that. The leaders of the labor movement get that they have to fight harder to win back these voters. They can't put such emphasis on on free trade agreements. And I think we're seeing more working class voters, align themselves with Democrats than before.
And I would also say, frankly, it was a quite a different tone when Jen Psaki, Biden's press secretary, and Biden himself were asked about, to comment on Bessemer, Alabama workers trying to unionize, others trying to unionize. They kind of threw into legalese. Oh, well, we can't really get into it legally. They kind of said, well, they have a right to, but they wouldn't really go any further than that. But boy, when those those Chicago school teachers were actually demanding safety and were temporarily not going back into school because of the Omicron surge, they weighed in heavy against those teachers. So I found that to be a little bit of a different tone.
Okay, I read that somewhat differently from you, Jordan. I think, so with regard to the first unionization effort at Amazon in Bessemer, Alabama, Biden went pretty far in saying, I'm all for unionization. He said in the middle of this campaign, he said, I'm all for unionization. I don't, management should certainly not break the law in pushing for unions, and unions have built the middle class and they're great for the nation. He did stop short of saying, hey, folks, vote for the union at Amazon. But I thought that was one of the more pro-union statements ever made by an American president. And then when Kellogg's, during that long, terrible strike a few months ago, announced that it was going to use permanent replacement workers, which really, again, the United States is one of only 2 or 3 industrial nations in the world where it's legal to use permanent replacement workers to take away the jobs of people who are on strike. And that's a real way to, drive huge fear into the hearts of strikers. When Kellogg threatened to do that, Biden came out right away and issued a very strong statement saying, don't do that. That undermines your workers. That undermines job stability. That undermines the middle class. So he's been quite good in ways. Chicago's a huge mess. And I think, Biden, the White House saw that a lot of Americans were angry that the schools remaining closed, and they were pissed at a lot of Democratic mayors. Look at San Francisco and the teachers unions there for going too far to keep the schools closed. And the Chicago Teachers Union, the LA Teachers Union, the San Francisco Teachers Union have been among the most aggressive in demanding the schools remain closed. And Biden and many Democrats, and now look at what's happening in New Jersey and New York and Connecticut. They think we got to move faster to open the schools and
it's politics.
And some of it's politics.
Yeah.
And the Chicago Teachers Union is a great union. It led this hugely important teacher strike, and I'm going to forget the year 2013 that really helped revive labor in the United States. But they and Mayor Lori Lightfoot are in this huge cage match trying to tear each other's eyes out, and it's unfortunate because they're both trying to do the right thing, but they have so much disdain for each other that I think the White House has also signaled to the union and to Lightfoot, cool things down. It's making us look bad.
Yeah, I want to play this clip real quick, and then get your reaction to it.
I don't think that's the way it's supposed to be. Thought they cared about our home life. They don't care about our home life. They care about our work life. Right. We're just a number to them. We're as replaceable as a light bulb.
There's a lot of people that are homeless Amazon workers.
Right. At last count, there were about over 100 cars in this outside parking lot and the inside parking lot, the covered multi-layer lot behind me. And they're there 24/7, including on the holidays, like on Christmas and New Year's Day when there aren't that many people here. They're here 24/7. And I feel for them, I'm one of them. So, we try to advocate, and I'm trying to hook up people with other people so that we can do roommate situations and share expenses and stuff. You can't do it. You can't do it without working 2 or 3 jobs in New York or working a ton of overtime in here. You have to max out at 60. You can't go over 60 hours. So that also plays into the fact that hourly workers, mostly black and brown employees, do not get promoted. They just don't get promoted. They're not given interviews. Everybody in there in these buildings plays favorites. You have to be a young white male fresh out of college in order to get into a management position here.
You're currently homeless working at Amazon?
Currently am, yeah. I have been homeless for the past, 2.5 almost 3 years that I've been here now, and I haven't been able to afford a place.
You know, it's amazing to me because we're seeing strikes happening all over the country, is workers who have been, exploited and beaten down. They're kind of saying enough is enough. I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore.
I think what we're seeing across the country is, even though some workers' wages are viewed as high, it's not really keeping up with the cost of living. And then they look at the corporate side of things, where executives are making hundreds and hundreds of times what a line worker does.
What they did was, promise, the guys that were already employed there that, they could keep their benefits and everything. And the people hired after 1st of October 1997 would come in, work for a drastically lower wage, a pension that was about a third to half of our, our predecessors, no post-retirement health care.
In terms of some of the working conditions at Starbucks, one of the biggest things is seniority pay. Michelle's been working at Starbucks for 11 years. I've been working at Starbucks for 4 or 5 months, and our wages are separated by 30 cents, if that.
Corporate media had us believing that we're just lucky to have a job. We're lucky. If you're still at a place that still offers insurance and you're not paying, you're lucky.
I wanted to ask you, I've covered a lot of these on the ground, and the common thing you see to me is there's this talk about, the economy's booming and jobs are coming back and GDP is great and unemployment's at lows. And you get that a lot from the media. Obviously, you were with the New York Times, so the media tends to focus on those kind of measurements. But then when I go around and I'm talking to workers, it seems like an economic Hunger Games out there. Workers are working multiple jobs. They're lucky if they have decent benefits. And they're being, in many cases, intimidated, threatened by companies like Starbucks and Amazon. Can you kind of talk about that gap between the way the media frames things about the economy and like the actual economy for like the worker bee?
Yeah, so I agree with a lot of what you're saying. And so my first book was called The Big Squeeze: Tough Times for the American Worker. It came out in 2009. And I was on the labor beat at the New York Times, from 1995 to 2013. And I remember the first decade of this century, corporate profits were booming, reaching record levels. The stock market was again reaching record levels. Productivity per worker per hour was reaching record levels. Yet we saw wages really stagnant. We saw companies making workers pay more and more for their health coverage. We saw companies taking away good pensions and replacing them with 401ks. We saw companies reducing the number of paid sick days, reducing paid vacations. And in my book, The Big Squeeze, I talk about this crazy disconnect where corporations are doing fabulously. Wall Street's doing fabulously, yet they're squeezing workers terribly. And that was the era of really increased focus on profit maximization and corporations trying to make Wall Street happy. So, again, I guess I see it somewhat different from you. So during the pandemic, there's been a lot of great media coverage on how terribly workers were treated. How people, a lot of companies, didn't have enough masks or PPE for workers. Companies talk about we're engaging in stakeholder capitalism. We're gonna not just focus on maximizing profits and serving shareholders. We're gonna help all our stakeholders, including workers. Okay, you frontline workers at supermarkets, at Walmart, you have to continue being cashiers. And okay, we're not going to require customers to wear masks because we don't want to alienate them. So you have to run the risk of breathing their COVID. And many companies, while they're white collar workers who make $150,000, $200,000 a year working at home safely, the frontline workers are still just making $10, $12 an hour. And so many companies did not give any hazard pay. And I think a lot of retail workers were writing stories about how that sucks for workers and how unfair that is. And while the retail CEOs are piling on extra millions of dollars in their salaries, that the retail workers are being screwed. And now, and we've seen many stories about dangers for bus drivers and nurses and people who wash the laundry in hospitals. And there are a lot of very good pro-worker stories. So now a lot of industries, companies are having a hard time finding enough workers, and wages are going up in a significant way for the first time in forever. And we're seeing that story. And that's a good story for workers, but we're also seeing the great resignation where never before have so many workers quit their job. And I think, when the media writes about that, that's kind of saying, you know what? Lots of workers leaving their jobs because they think their jobs suck. And that shows that employers are not doing the right thing. And if you studied, labor studies or sociology, they say workers have two ways to improve their lot at work: through a union, through voice, or through exit. So, because a lot of workers in the United States, with only 6% of private sector workers in unions, they don't have much of a voice to improve their lives. And I think that's a big reason we're seeing so many people quit their jobs, because, we have this low road economy where so many employers, don't treat their workers right. And people say they have this opportunity with the unemployment rate so low, they're saying, screw this, I'm going to go across the street and find a better job with better pay and better treatment.
Yeah, I see it. I see some of what you're saying. I also believe that, based on what I've seen, listen, Amazon sponsors and advertises with most of the mainstream media. You could go down the list, Starbucks and other major companies, they're sponsors, they're advertisers. In my, just one example, I broke a story last year, a 38-year-old Amazon worker. They had workers in Virginia literally administering COVID nasal swabs on coworkers. Not nurses, not doctors, workers playing doctor. They did not give a 38-year-old black woman the proper PPE. At 38 years old, she dropped dead one day.
Right.
To be clear, I don't know if she had COVID. There was no way to know. Amazon would not help the family with an autopsy. I tell you that story because you probably never heard it, because the media wouldn't.
I actually did hear it. I actually did tweet about it. But I think that story, and congratulations on breaking that story.
Pashan Brown was her name. Yeah.
But it showed, people ask me, why is there this wave of unionization and great resignation? It's because a lot of workers feel that they were treated shabbily. I could use some curse word, really terribly during the pandemic, especially all these, even Walmart workers who are like really beaten down and intimidated. They say, Walmart, please don't let in shoppers unless they're wearing masks. And Walmart basically said, screw you, we're going to let our shoppers in without masks in many states. And that's seriously dangerous. And you look at the Walmart in Worcester, Massachusetts, where very early on in the pandemic, 70, 80, 90 workers came down with COVID, and the meatpacking plants where 1,000 workers came down with COVID. A lot of companies did a very, 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 very bad job in taking care of their workers. And I think now that workers feel they have some power with some leverage, with the unemployment rate so low, I think that's why we're seeing at Starbucks, at Amazon, and elsewhere, there's more of a move to unionize.
And my last question, psychologically, not that that's your profession, but, I've been on the ground and it's nice seeing solidarity. I mean, the working class in this country, it's been hammered probably for 40 years. The chart. I mean, income inequality, the wealth hoarding to the top. That's since 1980 when Reagan got in there. Obviously, union busting wasn't born with Reagan, but it certainly was expedited under Reagan. And then the trend has continued with the wealth basically being hoarded all the way to the top. And I have seen, there have been periods where workers just are, basically complacent, deflated, and feel like there is no hope. So why bother? To you, what does it say that we're seeing this camaraderie? We're seeing this solidarity. We're seeing workers have that I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. Is that a psychological function? Is that a function because labor and unions are kind of being revived? Obviously not to what they were in the 40s and 50s, but what do you attribute to this current surge?
So I started covering labor for the New York Times in 1995. I retired from the Times in 2013, but I continue writing, every week about labor matters. Certainly it's the most, there's the most energy in the labor movement that I've seen since 1995. And it probably, even going back to the 1980s, I don't think there's been so much worker energy. And I think there are several reasons for that. I think, the pandemic really shined a very naked, bald, bright light on how so many employers treat their workers poorly. The fact that so few companies gave their frontline workers who endangered their life every day, getting on the bus, standing before the, standing at the, standing up there as cashiers at the cash register, or, working alongside, 18 inches away from other people in the meat packing plant. They're risking their lives every day, and yet so few companies, even though they're making a lot of money during the pandemic, didn't pay hero pay or hazard pay to their workers. I think a lot of workers who saw their coworkers die, who saw their coworkers get very sick, who saw their coworkers get sick and not get paid sick, they say, this totally sucks and we got to change it. And normally American workers are often scared to stick their necks out because unemployment is high or there isn't much worker energy. Now, there's this confluence of circumstances where workers have more leverage because the unemployment rate is so low. They see all this other worker energy out there. That was kind of started in 2018 with the huge teacher strikes in West Virginia, Oklahoma, Arizona. That really opened a lot of people's eyes to, hey, look, workers can stand up. They can go on strike. It also happened in Chicago and LA. And now, we see, some of the big strikes this year at Kellogg's, at Nabisco, at John Deere. And people see that, again, these well-known companies, and now the unionization drives at two of the nation's most famous companies, Starbucks, Amazon. There's a lot of energy, there's a lot of attention going to labor, and also helping that there's a lot of kind of influencers, in digital media. They're unionizing, adjunct professors are unionizing, grad students are unionizing, nonprofit organization workers are unionizing, political campaign people are unionizing. These are very influential people. Yes, these are white collar jobs, but I think they're kind of buzzing about the advantages of unionization. I think that is really percolating, no Starbucks pun intended, that's percolating through the economy much more than was the case 5 and 10 and 15 years ago. And I should add that, the Gallup poll, for years and years and years, Gallup does an annual survey of how Americans feel about unions. And in the latest survey, it found that 68% of Americans approve of unions and 77% of young Americans age 30 to 34. That's the highest number since 1965 in over half a century. And also there have been some recent studies by professors at MIT and at Columbia saying that basically 1 in 2 non-union workers say they'd like to join a union if they can. So there's a lot of forward momentum for unions right now. And my feeling is if there were an even playing field, and if Amazon and Starbucks weren't doing all sorts of jujitsu and everything they can to prevent a union, we'd see this mass movement of workers into unions. But because corporate opposition is so aggressive, intense, and sophisticated, that makes it very hard for the union movement to rebound. When you see that 1 in 2 non-union workers say they'd like to join a union, but only 1 in 16 private sector workers are in a union, that says something. That says that corporations are trying very, very hard to prevent workers from being in a union.
Thank you, Stephen Greenhouse, a longtime New York Times reporter, retired a couple of years ago. Also is from my birthplace, Massapequa, New York. So we have that in common.
Yeah.
And still does great writing about labor. I really appreciate you taking the time. Also, check out his book, author of Beaten Down, Worked Up, The Past, Present, and Future of American Labor. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you very much. Be well. Keep it up.
So that was my interview with Stephen Greenhouse, former New York Times labor reporter. Thought he gave some really good historical context into where we were with labor a century ago, how bad things have gotten, how things have fallen off among labor, and where things stand now as far as these strikes, union drives. I think he would probably give the Democratic Party more majority benefit of the doubt than I would. So it was, interesting. We had a little back and forth as far as the Democratic Party's role in squandering and demolishing unions. But I thought he was a good guest, and we're trying to have on, different guests, experts, historians. They might not agree. We might not agree with them on all things, but trying to mix it up. So I thank him. By the way, just so you know how busy I am, while that was airing, because that was not live, I had recorded that earlier. While that was airing, I was recording an interview with Shama Sawant, the Seattle City Council member. I spoke with Shama Sawant for about a half hour as that was airing. And we spoke about a whole lot of things, including Amazon's union busting, including the Democratic parties, and particularly in Seattle, the Democrats are trying to take away hazard pay from grocery workers. Isn't that great? We also talked about what I view is a collective push by the media to make COVID disappear, to basically make it where, not a thing, we got to get back to normal, all this stuff. I'll just tell you, yesterday, literally 3,570 people died. 3,570 people died from COVID. You might not have known that if you were watching cable news. So we're going to air that tomorrow. My interview with Shama Sawant. Again, it was about a half hour. So really happy that we could have that for you tomorrow. I want to give some shout outs and also do a little bit more begging, because we're really trying to grow our membership. I'm also going to read some super chats. We got a couple new member signups today, so I want to give some shout outs. Welcome new Status Coup member Tony. Welcome new Status Coup member Kurt. Welcome new Status Coup member Jacqueline. Welcome new Status Coup member S. All I have is S. Welcome new Status Coup member Sean. So welcome. By the way, we also got a new patron today who signed up at $50 a month. On Patreon, we do have a $50 a month level. So welcome new Status Coup patron Arthur signed up at $50 a month on Patreon. Arthur Lee is his name. So new members, new patrons. Thank you. I'm going to be pushing membership a lot more aggressively. Yes, begging time. Not beyond begging, because you want to know what? I'd rather beg you, the working class, than beg the big banks or the fossil fuckers or big pharma or big real estate or Silicon Valley or big real estate, military industrial complex. You get the picture. Radical Rosie. Sorry about that. Radical Rosie signed up as a YouTube member. Thank you, Radical Rosie, for telling me. I forgot. We appreciate you. Yes, people who sign up as YouTube members, we love you. That doesn't show up on my phone, so that's why I forgot. So thank you for reminding me. But listen, obviously, we've been experiencing what you would call a YouTube blackout for a while. It's kind of going in waves. Some weeks are better than others where we're getting through YouTube suppression. And then some weeks are worse than others where you see the numbers are low. So right now, we need to grow our paid membership significantly, because if we can grow our paid membership significantly, then we could expand. Right now, behind the scenes, I've been having a conversation with some Colin, as well as two freelancers we have helping with marketing and other things, about additional freelance help for, administrative, almost like administrative stuff, research, production, booking guests. I need help. Because I'm literally, you could ask my wife, she's looking at me, and my health is being affected because I am having to do 5 people's jobs constantly. Not because the people we have, Colin and 2 other people that have been helping in freelance as freelancers, not that they're not great, but we just don't have the funding to, I need somebody to help me book guests. I need somebody to help me put together the live streams. I need somebody to help me with administrative tasks, billing, a lot of behind the scenes stuff that I don't want to bore you with. So your support is how we bring on those people. So if you have it, if you can support us, statuscoup.com/join. You could join for $5 a month. We also have $10 a month memberships. We also have $20 a month memberships, and we also have $179 annually. Thank you, Rain, but unfortunately we cannot have, well, no, I wouldn't say unfortunately, we cannot have volunteers. We're not a nonprofit. Status Coup is a for-profit company, and you have to pay people to work. And I would not feel right having people work, for free. That's not who we are as a company. So obviously we want to pay people. So if you can support us, please, statuscoup.com/join. I'm going to be honest with you. I haven't been traveling as much, partly, in large part because of the COVID surge. I didn't want to get COVID twice. But also we've had to pull back a little bit on the travel until we grow more, because traveling costs a lot of money. And we did a whole lot of on the ground reporting last week last year. And it adds up. It costs a lot of money to do this, kind of on the ground reporting. But we've been kind of picking and choosing a little bit more and trying to focus on growing the YouTube channel, bringing more eyeballs to the YouTube channel, because right now we need to get new eyeballs to the YouTube channel so we can convert those viewers to paid members. So again, if you already are a member, we love you. If you're not a member, I want you to think about it, because it literally, you could become a member for as low as $5 a month. That equals 16 cents a day. Let me repeat, 16 cents a day. We also have higher memberships, $10 a month, $20 a month, or $179 annually. But every member that signs up, it makes a huge difference. The other thing I will say, without getting into such detail, we are actively working to get larger funding, because at a certain point, we're going to need bigger funding if we want to really make this grow and make Status Coup bigger. We're not taking shortcuts. We're not looking for big funding from like banks or corporate scum or, Democratic or Republican Party donors. So don't be worried about that. But we are looking for bigger funding, and it helps when you're approaching people for bigger funding to show, hey, look at this already solid membership base we have of paying members. This is how many members we have. This is how much revenue we're bringing in per month. It really helps to show, hey, we have solid numbers without the larger funding. So if we could get larger funding, look at the numbers we got when we didn't have a full team, when we didn't have an advertising budget, marketing help, that kind of stuff. So again, anything you could do, please support us. There's a lot of outlets that ask you to be patrons and, ask you for money. But generally speaking, they're doing mostly hot takes, reactionary stuff, online food fights. We're trying to provide actual journalism, independent journalism, cover the stories that aren't sexy, cover the stories that involve the controlled demolition of the working class, cover the United Corporations of America, which, by the way, we're selling that shirt at statuscoup.com/store. So if you like the flag, we made kind of a knockoff shirt. We couldn't make the exact flag because it's not ours, and that would be a copyright violation. But we did make the United Corporations of America shirt, which right now is selling pretty well for us, which is another great way for us to make add revenue. So if you like United Corporations of America, wear it, order it, statuscoup.com/store. You could also send it to your Republican uncle. You could also send it to your neoliberal auntie. So you could wear it, and you could send it to people that need a little convincing. So that you could find that at statuscoup.com/store. You could also find our Fossil Fuckers shirt at statuscoup.com/store. You could also find our My Quote shirt. Most people are not lacking compassion in this country. Most people have no fucking idea what the hell is going on. So those three shirts are at statuscoup.com/store. We also have an alternative United Corporations of America shirt. That one only members can buy. So that one has Biden, Kamala Harris, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, I believe Warren Buffett, where the stars are usually. So that one's at statuscoupmember.com/member store. So if you're a member, go to statuscoupmember.com/member store. So let me make sure I don't miss any super chats. Let me make sure I don't miss up if we miss any signups. Of course, my phone. Maria just signed up. Maria! So welcome new Status Coup member, Maria. So that makes Maria, Tony, Kurt, Jacqueline, S, Sean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 new members today, plus that patron. So awesome, awesome, awesome. Thank you, Maria. Please, again, I'm going to be pushing this a lot more. We're going to be pushing membership a lot more. And I'm sorry if it turns some people off, but if I'm not going to ask, if I'm not going to advocate for us, who's going to advocate for us? We need to grow, and we need to do it now and quickly if we can. Statuscoup.com/join, $5 a month, or you could do higher levels. Thank you for the super chat. Fly Chomper Fly, $5. Problem is there are several parts of the country where, thanks to companies leaving the community, Amazon is one of the only major employers in town. That is correct. And why are a lot of those companies leaving the community? I give you NAFTA. I give you other trade deals. I give you TPP. I give you other forms of offshoring. So yes, Amazon becomes, and not just Amazon, other big corporate Goliaths become the biggest game in town. That's one of the problems in Bessemer, Alabama, where Amazon is the biggest employer, and there's not a lot of other opportunities in Bessemer, Alabama. Same thing with the Amazon workers in Staten Island. Sure, it's New York, but it's hard for them. It's hard for them because they don't have a lot of other options in New York that could pay them $17, $18 a month, which Amazon, the Staten Island warehouse, pays $17, $18 a month. The problem is $17, $18. Did I say a month? $17, $18 an hour. It's not going to get you that far in New York City. So there's many, many problems. And that's a good point. Fly Chomper Fly. And thank you so much for the super chat. Jordan's got a multitask. It comes with do it yourself independence. You have no idea the level of multitasking I do. That's why we're looking for freelance help for administrative tasks, reaching out and booking guests, sources, because I have a lot of sources that reach out to me late at night, weekends. So somebody helping me to communicate with our sources, to vet what they're sending us, so I don't have to work around the clock. So there's a lot going on. Justin Ford, $10. Hey, are you aware of REI in Soho is unionizing? I'm a big fan, worker at the Soho store, and I'm a monthly subscriber. Keep up your reporting. Thanks so much for the super chat, Justin. No, I'm not aware of that. I am not aware of that. And I tell you the truth, I don't know what REI is. So you could email us with more information. That would be great. info@statuscoup.com. info@statuscoup.com. If you want to send us more information. Glad you're getting great support from your guests. Yes, we are. We are getting great support from our guests, and we're also getting great support from new people signing up as members. So again, thank you, Maria, Tony, Kurt, Jacqueline, S, Sean. So that's 6 new members today, plus that patron that signed up at $50. So we really appreciate all of the support coming in. I know, it's a lot. It's not a small matter. I know a lot of people watching don't have an extra $5, $10 a month. So I know the people that are supporting us, you are supporting us because you really, really value the journalism that we're doing. You value the stories we break. You value the on-the-ground reporting we do. So I very, very much appreciate your support. It means a lot. And we just got to continue growing because honestly, I'm kind of burning, I'm doing the live streams. I'm doing the reporting. I'm doing a lot of the producing of the segments. I'm doing most of the administrative stuff at this point, which is a lot. You don't see it. And I don't want to bore you with it, but trust me, there's a lot of administrative stuff. So Colin is doing a shit ton behind the scenes. So it is very appreciated, all the people that are signing up. Colin, did I forget anything before I go?
I don't think so. Besides did you get all the super chats?
I saw one in the super
Oh, right. You left and came back. Let me paste them back.
Oh, I don't want to miss any. By the way, somebody just said Kyle gave me a major shout out in his last video. Which video? I haven't gotten a chance to see Kyle's latest videos. So I'll have to see. The only video I see is Fox Flips. Can you put what video you're talking about in the super chat so I could see? I appreciate if Kyle gave Status Coup and me a shout out. That's always helpful when Kyle helps us out. So please, if you can, put that in the super chat if he gave us a shout out. I appreciate it.
They're all there in the private chat.
Oh, okay. Sorry if I missed any. Ostenti Swift, $4.99. Hi, Jordan. FYI, at an event with Andrew Yang earlier this year, he mentioned the formation of an independent news network to combat the corporate media. I did hear about that. Somebody mentioned that to me a couple of weeks ago, that Andrew Yang was thinking about an independent outlet. Listen, if Andrew Yang, at this point, if Andrew Yang's interested in an independent media network, or if he's interested in funding what we're doing, I'm open to hear it. I don't think we agree on all things politically, but, beggars can't be choosers at this point. So if Andrew Yang wanted to grow an independent outlet or fund this one, as long as he knew he would not have any editorial say in what we do, he would not be involved at all with the day-to-day stories we choose, guests we do, reporting we do. If he knew that and agreed to it, I'm open to hearing it. for sure. Andrew Yang. Thank you for the super chat. Carrie, tip $10 at Rockfin. Good work, Jordan. Why, thank you, Carrie. Appreciate that. Loner Weirdo, €3. Thank you, Loner Weirdo. Appreciate it. Chris, $2. Union support increased 13% in polls since 2015. I wonder why. I would think Bernie's movement had something to do with that for sure. Thank you. I read Fly Chomper Fly. Problem is there are several parts of the country where, thanks to companies leaving the community, Amazon is one of the only major employees in town. Yep, I read that one, and you are correct. I think I got all the super chats. Let me make sure I'm not missing anybody before I say goodbye. All right. Last call, Maria, Tony, Kurt, Jacqueline, S, Sean. Thank you to our new members who signed up today. Thank you to, we got 1 or 2 new YouTube members. Thank you. We got a new patron that signed up at $50. Thank you for the super chats. Again, we will have an interview with Shama Sawant tomorrow. Some other things too. Thank you for watching. I will see you back here tomorrow.